Hello, Sales Freaks. It's Adon here, and today's episode, I want to continue the discussion from last week, moving from internal representations to probably the most powerful thing you can do to influence when you're in the sales process, when you're belly to belly, face to face with your prospect. You're not going to want to miss this. All right, so last week, if you recall, we kind of finished off right here with internal representations, right? It's part of what I call this century persuasion technique. And it's not about a manipulation, just to kind of recap, not about manipulation. It's not about lying. It's not about being deceitful. It's about understanding the way that we as humans interact with information. And so we talked about the internal representations, which is, we get information and we immediately access that information, right? So we see somebody and we generalize, right? We say they're smart, they're not smart, they're this, they're that, right? We kind of isms them. We generalize them. And it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's what humans do. We distort stuff, right? We hear something and we hear what we want to hear and discard the rest. You might have someone like that's in your family or a friend. You might say something to them. You might say 10 great things. One thing is just not so great, and they take that personal and they distort it and they make it a big deal. The other thing is delete, right? They delete information. So you tell them a whole bunch of stuff, they delete it all, and they heard what they want to hear, right? So they did, no, you didn't say that to me. Yes, I did. No, you didn't, right? And you know you did. So that kind of thing. So that's what we do as humans. We internalize it. It creates our state, creates our behavior. And so once we have connected with someone, when we're talking about, the sales process, meaning we've done our prospecting, our marketing, we're now on the phone with someone, we're belly to belly with them, we're on a Zoom call, we're in front of them in a sales call in the traditional sense, across from their desk, whatever it is, we are talking and interacting with someone who knows that we are there to talk to them about our products or services, whatever it is, okay? So we've done that work. That's what this segment is Sales Freak is about. It's about the process once you get the meeting. So the easiest way to persuade someone, to make them see the world the way you want them to see it, the way to influence somebody is to take them, once we have established the rapport, we have created their state. One of the best ways that we can create their state is by moving into metaphors. And metaphors are extremely powerful. Probably the greatest teacher that used metaphors was probably Jesus Christ, right? He used, they call them parables, but they're metaphors, they're stories, right? Parables, metaphors, whatever. They're stories to articulate your message. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we do that, why it's done. And probably the number one reason is that, we humans don't think in words, right? We think in pictures. And so when we say something to somebody, we are constructing an image. Sometimes it's a very vivid image. Sometimes it's a more like a spiritual image, if you will, we have a general idea of what we're seeing. Sometimes it's very constructive and very, very, very firm. But we create these pictures in our mind, and that picture creates our state, which creates our behavior. And so when we are talking or trying to persuade someone, the greatest thing we can do is to use questions and construct those questions in a way that create visuals. Now, that can be in the form of a question. It can also be in the form of a story. So one of the things I always liked to do is when I'm talking to somebody, assuming I don't have any presentations, I don't have anything, it's just me and them, maybe I've got some brochures or what have you, I don't want them looking at the brochure. I want them focused on me. So when I'm talking to them, I try to create visuals that's going to resonate them. So as an example, I might say, it smells like a cold winter's day, right? Someone gets that. It smells like what have you, or it has a sound and you punch it, whatever. And it has these visuals, these metaphors, these visuals, these stories that create some visual in the person. And when they create a visual, then they start to be focused on it, right? Just like when you're really watching a good movie, you're focused on it. Someone could be in the other room doing something and you're focused. Your attention is on that movie. And so stories help us remember, right? That's what they do. And I'm continuously trying to get better at telling stories. And I did a good job of it as a sales guy. And as I've transitioned myself into a marketer as well, telling stories when you're marketing is extremely important too, but it's a little different because you're writing it or you're doing it in visual form on the marketing aspect, which is another topic for another day. But stories are important both on the marketing and on the sales aspect. But the sales aspect from today is when we're on the phone to somebody, we're in front of them, right? We're not using PowerPoint slides and what have you. In this example, we're just talking face to face. So we're asking questions that create visuals, right? And a story could be 10 seconds long, it could be 2 hours long. But we want to have that story. And the process I like to use, and I don't know who to give credit to. I heard a guy talk about it on the internet many years ago. I haven't been able to find it since. And there's lots of different acronyms, and they're all very similar. But I like the 3 S's, which is the set it up. You set up. You do the setup. You do the situation, and you do the solution, right? So you set it up. You give a situation, which is you and somebody in a conversation, or you can use it. You can use it in so many different ways. So you set it up. You say, well, I always like to think of what Winston Churchill said, right? That's a great one. You set it up, right? The situation, you use a quote or something that they did to create an image, to create a visual, to create commonality, and then you present the solution. So there's it's kind of like you get them, you set it up, right? You hook them. You give them the situation, the story, the meat, if you will, and then you give them a solution, right? A call to action, or present your product, or talk about the next step. But stories are really, really important because they help us. They help us with that. Now, parables, metaphors, stories, all very similar, but they do mean different things to different people. So a metaphor is kind of like using an example. A story is clearly a story, and a parable is a story too, but it's just a little bit different, usually a little bit shorter. But at the end of the day, they're the same thing. You're creating a visual, and you're having someone be able to see. Because when you get a picture, it creates emotion, and that's what we really want to do. Right? We want to induce the emotional states, cause the listener to access mental resources. Right? We help reframe the situation. It helps us to reduce resistance. So stories are incredibly important, both from the marketing aspect and from the sales aspect. So my question today is what's your story? What's the story, Morning Glory? What's your story? So as if you're meeting someone, you sit back, you might say, Mr. Customer, do you know anything about my XYZ company? Right? To sit back and say, well, we started in 1952, and we have 60 years, and we have the XYZ award, and no one really cares, right? But what you can do is get people emotionally involved. Do you know anything about XYZ company? No. Oh, well, and then you go into a story about what created the company, or the cause of the company, or the vision of the company, and you draw that person. You say something like, the owner of the company was homeless, and he lived on the street and lived in this car, and then he did this, People, oh, wow, right? And you create emotion, you create interest, you create commonality, you create awareness. I used to, for years, would sit back and I was trained to have my little, my stupid little flip chart and pull it out. And, well, we were founded in 19X so-and-so. And we have 862 SKUs and we have 98% delivery rate. And people are just sitting there going, And you know what they're thinking because you do it too. You're thinking, God, get this person out of here. But when you start telling stories, you draw them in. And so tell as many stories as you can. The story about how you got started, the story about your product or service, how it helps somebody solve something. And if you're not telling a story, then ask questions that create stories. So not open-ended. We all know not open-ended, but Mr. Customer, can you give me an example of a challenge that you've faced with regards to XYZ? Right now, they're telling you a story, right? And if you can keep stories going, then you will create an atmosphere of commonality. You'll create an atmosphere of interest. You'll create an atmosphere of creating solutions. Really try to get away from the staunch, if you will, this is what we do. And I really did that for a long time. I was really going with my brain, right? I was like, thinking logically. People will get logically into a system, and they do. But it's the emotion, it's the vibration, it's the energy, it's the feeling that they get. And if you can induce a feeling as soon as possible, then people start to get emotionally involved and they care more. And so that's why it's really different than if, when something bad happens to someone that you've heard of, as opposed to something bad happens to someone that you know, because you're emotionally involved with them. You feel bad for them. You feel their pain. Whereas if someone way out, you don't really know them, you've heard of them or something like that, it's different because you're not emotionally involved. So recognize the importance of persuasion, but it's not manipulation. It's understanding how we think and how we behave and how we receive information. And stories are absolutely essential. Even more now with internet age and with so much information, it's hard for people to remember information, but it's a lot easier for them to remember stories. And so if you can create a story about you and your business, why you got started, and you have different stories for different segments of the sales process, from who you are as a company, customer satisfaction, customers doubting and then being transformed and becoming believers. If you give stories, you're going to notice that it will change. People will change their response to you will change dramatically very fast. And again, in closing, remember, set it up, right? Give your situation, your story, and then a solution. And the solution is, your call to action, your offer, what have you. And of course, it has its place. And a call to action is a next step, right? So it's not, depending on the situation, you're not going to ask someone to marry you. You're going to ask them for their phone number, or you're going to ask them for a coffee date, or you're going to ask them for a whatever date. It's a process, right? You're not going to ask for marriage right away. So your call to action is the next logical step, because in sales, you're here and you want to get here. And very rarely do you just do a huge leap. You go in steps, right? Here's where you are. Here's the chasm. Here's where you want to get. And here's the steps to getting there. So as an example, you find them attractive. Maybe you want to marry them. You're going to take these steps to get there. You're not going to go right to the marriage. And it's the same thing in sales. You want to become their customer. You want to become them to be a raving fan. You want them to love your company. But the first step is to build trust. The next step is to find their issues. and go step by step by step. And if you can tell a story each way, you're going to notice that you don't really have to close anybody. You just logically move into the next step because you have a process where you are drawing them in with stories, with metaphors, with parables, and everybody likes a good story. And he with the best story, she with the best story in sales wins. Hope you found this of value. Have some exciting new program that is being launched. I will explain it and introduce it to you next week. For those in the cleaning industry, I think you may found it of value. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, where we talk about marketing, marketing tactics with Marketing Freak, 12 p.m. Pacific time. I'll see you then. Take care.